Hello, everyone. Today, hoping this is going to be a very interesting chat because we've just recorded this podcast without me putting the record button on, and we're recording it again. So I hope you're going to get all the value that I got out of this first time through, because I'm talking to Lucia Knight, and she's the author of this incredible book, XChange. And just to read from the back here, too many people in their 40s and 50s are trapped in work that bores them, drains them of energy, stresses them out, threatens their relationship, and simply feels meaningless. This rebellious generation, and we are very rebellious, has been tamed by the corporate master and trained into submission. And Lucy's challenging us to step back, look at what we wanted, where we are now, and what we want to create the next step. And she says, and hopefully is going to explain to us today, it's possible to take control of your own career and work story. So how?
Oh, it's dead easy, dead easy. I'll give you a 3-step easy process and we'll go from there.
I don't believe that. I think it's much harder than that.
I think you and I know similar people, and we understand how tricky it is if you have spent 20 years in a career in a similar field or similar industry or similar arena. It's really tricky to imagine what your future could be like outside that. But I see so many people who wake up after 20-ish years and feel stuck, and the most common thing people say to me is, I feel that there's more to life than this. This can't be it. And if they're staring down a barrel of another 10 or 20 years, it just seems impossible. Now, some people can do 40 years in the same career, in the same industry, but it's so common now that we have a wake-up moment, and it's what we do with that wake-up moment. So we can either quash it, pretend it doesn't exist, and it comes out in all sorts of other areas, or we attack it head on and investigate it, dive into some of the feelings and figure out if there's a way to do work that matters and feels better.
And I know in the book here, you've been talking to a lot of people about what actually works. And there's some fabulous stories in here. Yeah, have you got a favourite story of change, one that where people really made a difference and got out of that sort of, what I would call an oh shit moment?
So my favourite story, so I interviewed 100 professionals, very normal professionals, who didn't become billionaires overnight, very normal people who had that wake up moment and did something about it. And they described themselves as successful career changers, but successful doesn't mean they're billionaires. It in fact means that they are happier after the change than before. So my favorite one, my favorite one is the first one I put in the book. So this is a story of an individual called Kate, who worked for probably just less than 20 years in a defense arena, all over the world. And back in the UK, she has 3 children. She lives in Surrey, and she's wondering if her future is going to be the same as her past. So what she does is, on the way home from a fairly boring board meeting, she calls her best friend, and she'd been listening to a Radio 4 show on the uprising of gin. And independent gin makers. And she loves gin, and her friend loves gin, and they decided on a phone call to become gin makers. So they had no spare money. All of their money was being paid into their mortgages and their 3 children. No spare money. So what they decided to do was a little experiment. So they took the money that they would normally spend on a monthly basis in their gin consumption. And I did not ask, I often think I should have asked that, but I didn't ask how much that was, but it wasn't a lot. Right. And they invested in a still, and they and some botanicals, and they created their first gin, which wasn't great, they said, but they evolved it over time. But they were only doing this in the weekends and in the evenings after their 3 children had gone to bed. So not only did they love it, they loved the experiment, they loved spending time together, they described the first years as simply fun, but they also took lots of experiments. So they took their gin, one of their probably 2nd or 3rd or 4th gins, to Fortnum & Mason's, to the buyer of gin at Fortnum & Mason's, and they won, or were offered, Gin of the Month twice that year. So in their first year of operation, they were offered
That's
Gym of the
incredible.
Month in a national, really impressive boutique shop. So I love their story. And 4 years later, so from the beginning point to 4 years later, so I went to see them just last year, and they had earned enough money to grow the business phenomenally. One of them works full-time as a CEO in the business now.
Yeah.
So she gave up her corporate career, works full-time. The other is still working full-time, but spends all her spare time in the business. So I love that story.
It's quite interesting because I think there's several things for me that come out. I mean, one of them is the idea that, you know, they just did it in their spare time. It was almost like a bit of an experiment. Let's just see how it goes.
Yes.
And the second thing is about being brave, and actually for a lot of people that's quite tough, you know, just doing it,
Okay.
trying it.
Yes. But they didn't set out, and many of the individuals, I'm trying to think if it's all, but almost all of the individuals I interviewed did not set out to create a gigantic global brand. They set out, just as the gin makers did, to do something that they would enjoy on the side, and then to make it commercial as time went on. So if we were to come up with a new business, you and I, Andrew, I think we could come up with a tiny experiment that we'd spend a couple of weeks on, and it's not as scary that way.
No, it doesn't
Nobody
sound.
start. Yeah. Does that feel scary if you and I were to create gin together over a couple of weeks and then meet 3 weeks later and test it with our friends? Does that sound scary at all?
No, I mean, when you put it in that sort of light, it sounds, you know, achievable. And I suspect most of us, you know, think, oh, I've got to set up a big business and I've got to do this and, you know, I've got to do that. And we get overwhelmed by all this stuff we've got to do and how we've got to get it right. But
Yes, and
actually
indeed,
trying it makes so much sense.
So, and experiments are so necessary.
Yeah.
You know, from a career that we spent 20 years in one place, we're not necessarily experimenting. So we have to learn how to experiment. And sometimes that is just in our life, expanding our comfort zone, you know, doing a TikTok dance with your grandchild, or turning left versus right on your dog walk, you know, just experimenting every minute of the day, so that when you then point that experimental mindset at your work, it's just not that scary. You know, you're not putting all of your eggs in one basket. You're just doing a couple of weeks of an experimentation. You know, there's another story in the book, someone who's called Ma Baker, her name's Liz, but she has created a micro bakery in her kitchen. Yeah. And she's got fabulous stories of experimentation, of volunteering washing dishes in bakeries so that she could get to understand recipes and see how it works. And she's got loads of opportunity to grow that to a big business, but she's chosen not to. She's chosen to keep it micro because she loves every minute of it. She can come downstairs and cook in her pajamas and deliver her bread to her customers at whatever time of the day she decides.
It's something very special about doing something you enjoy, something that, you know, kind of floats your boat, ticks the box. Did you find that was an important part?
Yes. So so one of the first things I encourage people to do when they're trying to come up with an idea about how they could overhaul their career is to figure out the activities that they do naturally better than most people around them. The activities that when time passes quickly when they're doing them, the activities that they can do all day and still have the same energy at the end of the day. So once you find those activities, which I call superpowers, when you're using those skills, they then become the heart of the design of your future work. And most people have a rough idea what they are, but they're kind of hard to find. But once you find them, you know that they have to be designed into every single day of your future work in order for it to feel fulfilling and satisfying.
I'm just wondering, you know, that obviously a lot has come out of these 100 interviews. Did you find any other patterns that were there that were equally important?
Yeah, so I find 8 patterns, and I've listed them all in the book, but so a couple of them that would be relevant for your audience. So personalizing success is a pattern that every single one of the 100 individuals needed to, a process they needed to go through. So what I mean by that is that they needed to, not necessarily forget, but they had to take a moment of reflection, or a week or a year of reflection, and figure out what they wanted their future to look like. What would success look like in their future? Because previously it very much looked like moving up the ranks, you know, managing bigger teams, taking on more responsibility, etc., etc. But if they've had that wake up point where that's not successful, it doesn't feel right or good anymore, then you've got to define success differently. So everybody had to do that, and therefore their designs were so different and so personal. This is a little bit harder to define, but I call it powerful vulnerability. So every single individual who had a wake up moment and woke up saying, is this it? They had to say out loud, quite bravely, I am somewhere I don't want to be, and I don't know how to get out of it yet. So when they said that, it opened up possibilities for them, which changed from I'm feeling stuck to I don't know how to get out of here yet, which meant that they could go and find people who had moved beyond their position, or they could go and find a coach or someone who could help them take them through steps. But that was a freeing moment of vulnerability, and all of them had it in different ways.
That's an incredibly powerful statement, isn't it? You know, I am stuck. I don't know how to get out of it yet, but I will find a way out of this.
And once you say yet, that's the magic word, because that's defining today. Well, tomorrow you might find the answer, but you've got to start searching today. So it's a very, it sort of drove people towards action. And another thing that might be interesting to you is, we've talked a little bit about this in previous conversations, was conscious planning.
Yes.
It is my opinion that at our age, or any age beyond our age, leaps of faith just don't work. No matter how much money, time, energy you have, a leap of faith from point A to point Z just doesn't work. It's an evolution of a process where these experiments come into play, and that we refine those experiments and analyze their success, but then we consciously plan them into our future in the same way that we consciously plan our superpowers into our daily activity. So it's super, super conscious, super, super deliberate, and zero guessing.
No, I am so into that, the idea of conscious planning. Now, I know in your book you mentioned personal kryptonites. Do you want to explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so opposed to superpowers is our kryptonite, and we all have a unique perspective on kryptonite. So it's a little bit like Superman's kryptonite. So when he touched it, his powers disappeared. And so kryptonite is, we need to list kryptonite to get rid of it, for it to lose its power. So for me, my kryptonite in commercial work, so I spent 20 years in headhunting all over the, Australia and the UK. So I wrote down what my kryptonite was. So I didn't want to be told what to do anymore. I didn't want to do work that didn't matter to me. I didn't want to commute 2 hours a day. So those are my kryptonite. And once I wrote them down, I thought, well, I don't have to do those. So what do I want? That was the next stage. Now that was much, much, much more difficult. But understanding and releasing your kryptonite is a lovely, lovely feeling.
I just love the way you put it, because it is so understandable. I often talk to people about, I just wondered what had happened there.
Sorry, my power was going down, so I had to go and get my power lead. Sorry about that.
Don't worry. But I think one of the things I really love about, and another shameless plug for the book XChange, is that you put it in such easy to understand language. It's very accessible, and I really love that. I just wondered, apart from another plug for XChange, have you got any other resources that you would suggest that might be useful to someone who's feeling a bit stuck in their work time? I mean, they may be actually feeling a little bit desperate. They may realize that their work's not going to be there in a few weeks, few years time.
Yes. Okay, so there's two things that I will suggest. So the first is, so this is an unusual time, and there's a lot of emotion flying around. And if someone is at that wake up moment going, is this it? It's really comforting to have a step-by-step process that you can just start the thinking process. It's not going to overhaul your life in a day, but I have created it's called Where to Start, just a little one-page document that says the first 10 steps that I recommend if you're trying to do this at home alone. And it's everything from having a look at certain parts of your financial situation, to naming your kryptonite, to trying to find individuals who have changed career and feel happier, reading stories about them. So there's 10 steps that can be really personalized, and it's a great place to start. And it's low emotional strain, but it's exactly the right place to start figuring out little bits of the journey that need to start. And the other is, I have a relatively new YouTube channel. So one of the experiments that I'm doing in my career is trying to get in front of the camera, which is a very uncomfortable place for me to be. But I have created a YouTube series, which is the 15 myths behind career change at our age. And I think that's a useful place. Each of them are just 60 seconds or less. It's a really useful place to get an insight into some of the early stage thought process that you might want to consider if you've woken up going, I need tomorrow to be different.
Are you happy for us to share that with this post?
Absolutely. I'll send you some links to it. Yeah.
Fantastic. So just to kind of finish off, thinking of the sort of superpower Kryptonite, is there one really big sort of thing that you might say to someone who is a big piece of advice that you might give? Big piece, but someone who is in this situation.
My resounding feeling, and I'd like to transfer this feeling to someone in a magical, magic wand. You are not too old, and it's not too late. There are people in my book who are in their 60s who others were, I think 65 when he started his business, Jez Ray. There's never a too late moment. People who are in their 70s who've created amazing businesses and are joyfully still working. And I think our generations love to work. We just need to do work that matters to us.
And that's the whole thing about the indie generation. I'm not done yet. You can do it. What a fabulous way to finish off the podcast. If people wanted to get in touch to talk, of course, they could buy your book XChange, which I imagine is available on all. It's
on Amazon. Yes, exactly.
All good online bestsellers.
Retailers. The best place to have a look at loads of resources, I write articles all the time about tiny little bits of career change, is midlifeunstuck.com.
midlifeunstuck.com. Thank you very much for making the time to talk to us today, Lucia Knight.
It's an absolute pleasure. I've really enjoyed it, Andrew. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on the Indie Interview. For more information, tools, or to book one of our team to work with you or your business, or if you'd like us to speak at your event or conference, visit imnotdoneyet.co.uk. If you have any questions or comments, please email us at andrew@imnotdoneyet.co.uk. Please do follow or like us on Facebook or Instagram.